Hello, I'm Tortor Smith. I'm a stop motion animator and creative entrepreneur. Welcome to this Halloween themed tutorial on how to animate a pumpkin bouncing on the spot. So first of all, before we start animating our pumpkin, we want to make sure that our image is in focus. You can do a focus check in the Dragon Frame software and zoom in really close just to make sure that what you want is in focus. And then just adjust the focus ring on your camera until everything is sharp. You can then zoom back out and go to the production window and we can start. So I'm just getting my pumpkin in the correct position, and now I am taking those first 10 images of the static pumpkin as a handle to start off my animation. We do this so that there's a bit of flexibility in the edit. It's a really good idea to do this so that you have a ease into your animation. If you press Command and 0 on your computer keypad, you will be able to take 10 images in one go. This works for pressing Command and any number. For example, Command 5 would take 5 images. So now I'm just using that guideline tool in the Dragon Frame software with a nice medium thickness red line to just mark roughly where my pumpkin is sitting. This is a guide so that I can line up all of the pumpkins and it will appear like the pumpkin is bouncing on the spot. So you can see that I have sculpted pumpkins of different dimensions. Some are short and fat and some are tall and thin. This is to create the squash and stretch that you would get in a flexible, energetic ball bounce. Here you can see that I've replaced the round pumpkin with the squashed pumpkin, and you can see it looks as if that pumpkin is bouncing on the spot very simply. The next step is the pumpkin will be flying through the air. Now to do this you want to hold that pumpkin up. This can be done in a variety of ways. I've chosen a very simple way, which is to have quite a heavy spool of wire with a very thick and firm wire. If you just skewer your pumpkin, which is just solid plasticine, onto the piece of wire, you can then hold it. Now don't worry that the spool of wire is still in frame, because I am going to show you in another video how you do rig removal in Photoshop, and this is how you can edit out that spool of wire and give the illusion that your pumpkin is actually bouncing on its own. Now, to make a ball bounce, you want to use a sequence of shapes, starting from that ball at the base, then a squash to show the energy of that ball leaving the floor. Now as it starts moving up in the air, the pumpkin will stretch out and extend, as you can see it here. This is to show that elasticity as it's moving fast through the air, and as it reaches that top position in the bounce cycle, it will become spherical again. So as you can see, at that top position, I'm now using the round pumpkin, and this is because gravity is settled for a moment in the air and the weight of the object has caught back up with it. Now, sometimes it's good to take a few shots at this top position with a very subtle movement. So just a few millimeters higher or lower, just to give a momentary pause in that top position before it comes hurtling back down to the floor. This can also accentuate the weight of the ball. So now I'm ready to make my ball come back down to earth. It is now coming down with quite a force, so we're going back to that tall and skinny pumpkin to show the stretch in the weight that that pumpkin is carrying back down to earth. This is an exaggeration and it gives a really nice elastic cartoon-like bounce. Now the closer it gets to earth, we will switch out to a slightly fatter but not quite the round size yet pumpkin. This is to show that gravity is catching back up with the pumpkin. It's almost at earth. So when you're changing out these pumpkins, it's important to look at the stalk and the direction of the stalk and get that direction consistent throughout to give a realistic bounce. You don't want there to be a lot of twisting and turning in the movement. You just want a complete up and down. When that pumpkin hits the floor, you want to use the squashed short fat pumpkin, because this shows that there's an impact, you know. It displaces the plasticine. It displaces the weight of that pumpkin and spreads it out to show that there's been a force when it's hit the floor. When you've taken this shot, you'll then go back to your spherical, round, normal pumpkin shape to show that it's settled and that weight has bounced back and it is now in its original form. Here we can see, playing it back, is a nice little bounce there. You can see how the squash and stretch really adds to the illusion that the pumpkin is bouncing. So I'm just going to now start a second bounce. You can see but I've swapped from the round pumpkin to the slightly taller version, and I've raised it off the floor about an inch. So this will make the second picture in the sequence, and I'm just turning it there to make sure that the stalk is in the correct position like I mentioned before. One thing you want to make sure when you're using a rig like wire in this example is to make sure that that wire is not obstructing the shape at all. So you do not want the wire to cover the pumpkin. You want to conceal that wire behind or to the side. Otherwise it's going to be impossible to remove it from the image. So just make sure that none of that wire is in front of your pumpkin shape. Also, ideally you want the least amount to remove from your frame. So if you have got your hands in there, try and keep them as far to the side as possible. You don't want there to be shadows that are obstructing your pumpkin. Now you can see I've moved on to the tallest pumpkin, the skinny one, and this is to show the fastest point in the bounce as it's moving up in the air, and you can see I've gone up about another inch, maybe fractionally more than another inch in this bounce cycle. So we'll just take this picture. And then we are now at the top of the bounce cycle again, so we're going to switch out for the round pumpkin to show that the weight has caught up with it and it is now in its original form. That looks good, everything's lined up. You can see that the stalk is in the same position and that looks pretty good to me. So take that picture, and then I'm just going to move it down very slightly and take a second picture. Now we're going to go back down to earth, so I'm going to swap out that round one for the tallest pumpkin again. This time I've used a slightly different sequence of pumpkins. This should give an even more energetic and bouncy final bounce. This is something that you can play around with yourself. You can play around with where you position your different pumpkins, how many of each shot you use, and you'll get all sorts of different bounces. For example, if you want a ball to have even more exaggerated bounce and stretch, you could make an even skinnier tall pumpkin and an even wider fat splatty pumpkin. You could also make the squash and stretch more subtle by making pumpkins that are more closely proportioned to the original, or you could just use a completely round pumpkin with no squash and stretch, which would kind of give the feel of like a golf ball, because when you drop a golf ball and the golf ball bounces, it doesn't actually deform in any way because it's a very hard ball. My pumpkin is made of a very squishy, squashy substance in this example. I really wanted to show the exaggeration of the squash and stretch to show how you can make a really nice cartoon bounce. So just playing that back there, you can see how this pumpkin is bouncing. I think that looks quite nice. Very elasticy, very cartoony, very bouncy. So that's it, guys. That is how you animate a pumpkin bouncing. The techniques shown in this video are applicable to any type of ball, anything you want to make bounce. You can animate in the same way by making different proportioned versions of your original object. If you've got any further questions or there's anything that you don't quite understand, do let me know in the comments and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you're now ready to learn how to do rig removal, there'll be another video showing you how to edit out the rig in this video and create a pumpkin that is bouncing on its own with no support.